to LOA Today. I'm Walt. With me today is our own pianist in residence, Sam Page. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Now, the only reason we're a little unhappy is because our guest had to cancel. Oh, she had a personal emergency come up, so we may be able to get her back another time. But for the moment, we will be deprived of her wonderful services today. But that's all right. Sam and I are ready to carry on, to continue the conversations that we love to do here. Yeah, right? Because you got to be able to carry on, right?
Absolutely.
And we were kind of chatting, right? We were talking about what it is that we wanted to talk about today because our topic kind of got skewed, right? And you said, well, we ought to do a Q&A. And I thought, we haven't done one of those in a while. That's a good idea. So we'll do a little Q&A. And hey, Luke is in the live stream. So hey, Luke, how you doing?
Luke!
And yeah, so we'll do a little Q&A. And I was also thinking we could talk about dealing with disappointment because that's really what we're dealing with today, right? We were a little disappointed. Our guests couldn't come. So, how do you deal with disappointment?
Right.
I mean, I don't know about you. Ever since going through the Taya boot camp, disappointment doesn't really bother me anymore.
Not so much for me either. It's like for this circumstance, and for example, like find some good in it. It's like if she wasn't able to do it, I mean, she's experiencing what she's experiencing. I know nothing about that, and sending love and hoping for the best. But that, to me, it could be interpreted as just the universe intending that to be the case. Like maybe he wasn't meant to speak with us today, and maybe it was meant to just be us doing what we're doing now.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Because when you adopt, it's all about the perspective, right? What perspective are you going to take to deal with whatever the situation is?
Absolutely. Makes sense.
That's it in a nutshell. By the way, we got a taste of your new mic last week. It's sounding really good this week. So you made a good investment there. You're sounding really, really good. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Which is nice because we really haven't had much chance to talk because the mic kept cutting out before, right?
I know, right?
Yeah. So this is
kind
good.
of works out too.
Exactly. This is a trial. This is like the full scale trial, right? To see does it really hold up for the whole show?
Right. We shall see. But as the kids say, I'm here for it.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough. That's good.
That may or may not be what the kids say. I don't know.
I have no idea. Well, you're closer to that age than I am, so you'll know. I mean, anyway, but going to the idea of the Q&A, I dug up a couple quick ones on Facebook, and while we have a perspective that we've learned through Taya and other methods that helps us a lot dealing with what in this case was a very minor disappointment, other people in this world, and we know all about this, are in much more difficult straits, largely because they don't have the same kind of they don't follow the same kind of discipline we do. They don't engage in doing the exploration of spirit and energy and law of attraction, all that kind of stuff. So they really don't have the background we've got. And it occurs to me that we don't often run into people like who are really having a bad time because our vibrations are high. But when we do, it's good to know how do you help somebody like that if they're willing to be helped at all, which is a key point.
Definitely.
And this one post that I stumbled on, 2 minutes of searching, and then this came up. The person is really in a serious place. He says, "Can someone please help? I'm at a place in life where I don't want to live anymore." In other words, he's feeling suicidal. Now, first things first. I want to make sure that anybody who's ever confronted with somebody who is feeling suicidal, very first thing to do is help them contact their local suicide hotline. There's one in almost every country around the world. They are there staffed by people who are trained and skilled in handling these situations. So that's got to be the first thing, to make it give them a way to have a direct intervention so they can just deal with their immediate emergency right now. But let's assume, for the sake of discussion, Sam, that they've done that and they're now dealing with some of the stuff, but now they're just trying to deal with the emotional side of it. So that's something I think we can address, right?
Absolutely.
Have you ever been in a place like that?
I have, actually, and I've been to a few years ago, even kind of right before I kind of had the beginning of my little spiritual journey. I had utilized the suicide helpline a few times.
Did you really?
Yeah, actually. And it did help a lot because they're just people who are there willing to listen to your whatever you have. You can talk as much as you want. They're listening. They're the the couple that I've spoken to, both were very good listeners, at least, and they have awareness of different resources that can help you, based on kind of what you tell them and such. So it's definitely something I would. This sounds weird to say, but I, yeah, definitely would recommend that
Yeah,
resource.
I don't think it's weird at all. I think it's a beautiful thing to say, and I loved. I didn't know that you had ever dealt with that. You've just
Yeah.
given a great testimonial to why,
Uh,
if you're really in a bad space, you should call and get the help because it's there. That's
uh,
why it's there. That's why
for
they
sure.
created these hotlines. So
Definitely.
yeah, absolutely. And I take it then you found it. I don't want to make this sound trite.
Right. Right.
You found it helpful to get past the situation you were in by calling the helpline.
Definitely. I feel like in both cases, the conversations I had kind of just de-escalated the situation enough that I could just kind of relax. And I guess like the next is just kind of like allow yourself to go through the whatever you're feeling, allow yourself to feel it and let the emotions just flow out in as healthy a way as possible.
Right, right. Yes, because that's the key to it, isn't it? That when you're
Right.
in that really bad of a space, it's because you're hanging on to these really awful emotions, even though you don't know that. You don't realize
Right.
that's what you're doing, but that's what you're doing. And so, yeah, you need to find a way to release it. And
Mhm.
having
Absolutely.
guidance to do that makes a big, big difference. Seeing a couple
Definitely.
people saying hello in the live stream. So, hello, Jeff. And I'm not sure who the Facebook user, but someone says, "Hi, sweet Sam and wonderful Walt." Now, there's a nice greeting, right?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. I love that too. That's great. You've
Um,
made it, alliterative, right? Sweet Sam, wonderful Walt. That's cool.
oh, I love that.
um, but yeah, so okay, so we have you have some definite background. I have helped. I actually had an experience when I was in college, my freshman year.
Oh
I
yeah.
was not suicidal, but the school I went to was in Buffalo, New York. I went there for 1 year and then transferred. But that 1 year that I was there, it was the dead of winter, and anybody who knows anything about Buffalo knows their winters are serious winters,
Oh my God. Yeah.
just absolutely serious winters. And it was one of those really snowy days. There were a couple feet of snow on the ground, and at the time they had two main campuses. There was one downtown, and there was one out in the suburbs. That was a
Okay.
newer campus, and there was a lot of residential housing. That's where I lived, and it was kind of it was an unusual architecture. There were like four main residential quads, and
Okay.
each quad had a tower. It's like the Princess in the Tower kind of tower. It's like
Yeah.
everything else is really low, and then this big tower is like very strange design. But anyway, I decided one day, just there was nothing else to do. I mean, you had enough snowball fights. You're really done with that.
Right.
You're in the middle, you're like late February, early March, so you're kind of wishing that winter is over by this point, right?
Right. For
And
sure.
so I just figured I'd go up in the tower because I'd never gone up in the tower before. And I knew it was just a residential tower, so there wasn't going to be a whole lot up there other than rooms, but I just
Oh
wanted
yeah.
to see what it was like up there. So I got in the elevator and rode up to the top floor. I think it was like 10, 11 stories up. And I'm looking around and, oh, this is an interesting view. And then all of a sudden the elevator opens behind me. I turn and there's a person kind of stopped there looking at me, looking really, really upset. He was distraught. And I
Oh
didn't
my
know
God.
why. And he was kind of embarrassed, and he didn't really want to he didn't know what to do. He kind of like halted. I'm stepping out, not really stepping out. And I wasn't the most outgoing person at that time anyway. Not I've learned since then, as you can tell from doing a podcast, I
Oh
have
yeah.
learned how to be more outgoing. But at the time I was a pretty introverted person. But somehow I managed to stumble out with some kind of, what's up? Hi, I'm Walt, something like that. I don't know what it was. And for whatever reason, he must have trusted me because within about 5 minutes, I was getting his whole life story.
My goodness.
A perfect stranger, whom I had never met before and I've never seen again. And I learned it took a while to get this information out of him, but I learned from him he had come up there to jump off the top of the building.
My goodness.
He had come up there to commit suicide. And I had no training in any of this. And I'm thinking
Right.
to myself, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? So I did the only thing I knew to do. I just listened. Which was probably the best decision I could have made, but I had no idea.
Absolutely. And that could have been just what that guy needed.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
must have been.
and we talked for about a half an hour. Well, he talked for about a half an hour. I went, "Uh-huh, uh-huh."
Fair.
I didn't have a whole lot to contribute. I think at one point, I had gotten a pretty good, idea of what was going on with him. And to be honest, I don't remember what the issue was, but I'd gotten a pretty good idea of what was going on at that time. And I remember that I said a couple things, but I couldn't tell you what I said. I have no idea. All I know is we took the elevator down together,
Oh, that's wonderful.
which was the ultimate result, right? That's what the one you were
Yeah, for
really
sure.
looking for.
Oh, I
And
love that.
I just never really forgot that. And there were years after that where I'd ask myself, was that just because I was there for him to talk to? Did I actually help him? And I didn't know the answer.
Oh,
I didn't really know the answer. All I knew was that we helped him, you know, between the two of us, we helped him to decide to change paths. And so since you've been in that place where you kind of feel that urge, I'm wondering if you had been that person, how would you have experienced what I just described? How would that have played with you?
if I was the other person
If
rather
you were the
than
other person, yeah. Yeah,
just wanted to clarify.
because you've been in a similar role.
Yes, and I was thinking when you were telling that story, it kind of obviously a very different circumstance because you're
Sure.
face to face, but and he wasn't expecting anybody to be there, but in a way the part of the process was similar because he was just I think he just maybe he didn't realize it but just needed somebody to talk to, and because
Yeah.
that's like calling the helpline, it was the same thing. I was just talking, and as I was talking, and maybe he just needed to get it out and have somebody listen. And so I think
Mm,
I think if I were in his position and I saw somebody that had having that intention and then seeing a complete stranger there, as, as it seemed to be the case for this person, to stop them in their trap. Go out, coming out at the elevator with this intention, but all of a sudden, oh wait, there's a person here, and then they don't want to just go like, "Excuse me, I'm going to jump now" or whatever.
right,
Like you want
exactly.
to
Yeah.
just like, hey, and then so I would think that would be a very I think it was a very well timed manifestation, and I
Mm,
think I don't know if I would have seen it at that point, but definitely having somebody there to just talk to and listen to kind of get a lot of this out of my system and probably help some of those feelings.
yeah,
Oh yeah, help
yeah.
release some of those feelings. I guess.
It
Yeah.
certainly makes sense to me, and of course,
Yeah,
since
for
then,
sure.
I've learned quite a bit. Plus, I also married Louise, who's a former psychotherapist, so you learn a
Oh
whole
right.
lot when you marry a
Oh yeah.
psychotherapist. I mean, you just pick things up. It's just part of the package, right?
Oh
So
for
I
sure.
know a lot more now that I never knew then. One of the things that she told me, I'm kind of curious, you might be able to answer this question too, because you were in kind of a similar place. She said that she had not done a whole lot of work with suicidal types, although she had had a couple of clients who had been suicidal and she had
Mhm.
dealt with them. She told me, the general story about how she got them help. Um, but for the most part, she dealt with people who had substance abuse issues.
Oh
Um,
okay.
but nevertheless, she said there's a commonality that goes on there. People who have substance abuse issues are similar to people who have suicidal urges because whether it's substance abuse or another kind of addiction or just trying to end it, what they're really trying to do is to end pain.
Yes, that definitely resonates because at the time when I was having that sort of ideation, I was seeing a therapist, and he kind of called it out as such. He's like that I was looking at it more as a means of escape from bad feelings and such. But then,
Mhm.
like, kind of Taya, for especially, and just some other my whole spiritual journey as I call it, but Taya particularly like kind of helped me instead of like kind of just escaping it or bypassing it.
Mm.
Going deep into those, like, as we call them, the root transgressors, and
Right.
that whole detuning process. And but I did have some I did like have maybe a year's worth or so of like learning about the law of attraction and such before I got to a point where I was ready for Taya. But
Yes.
so there's
Right. Well,
that.
I know David doesn't even accept people in who doesn't have a pretty strong grounding anyway. He doesn't take
For
people.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. And hello, Shelly, in the live stream. We got a number of people jumping in. So hi there.
I love
I
that. Hey guys.
thank you guys for joining us today. So okay, that's interesting validation then. So
Definitely.
you agree that pain is what you were basically trying to overcome, trying to get past. And there are
Absolutely.
different kinds of pain. There's physical pain, obviously, but
Oh
there's
yeah.
also emotional pain. There's mental pain, just not necessarily tied to an emotion, although it usually is, but just
Mhm.
me- intense mental stress can actually create physical headaches.
Oh, for
It just,
sure.
so there's lots of different kinds of pain that people can deal with. Um, so okay, that Well, that leads us that's kind of the setup. So if you're dealing with
Yeah,
this person, like we start off with, okay, we're gonna do a little Q&A. Here's a person who's saying, I don't know what to do. I'm not really sure I want to live.
yeah.
What do you say to that person? You've been there. How would you respond to him if you were talking to him face to face?
Let me just first clarify. Is that the entirety of the question?
Yeah, it was a really short post. Can someone
Okay.
please help? I'm at the place in life where I don't want to live anymore. So he really didn't give you any details at all.
I would I I would maybe try to get some more information first of all and kind of
Mm,
go from there, but either like kind of get them start to talk because again, just maybe they just need somebody to listen,
yeah,
and then depending on what they say, give whatever guidance I can, but definitely life is worth living. Speaking as somebody who has many times experienced like suicidal ideation, I've never actually attempted, but I've definitely thought it enough. And there can be a point, for me, I've had my own experiences that led me to this sort of spiritual path, but that you sort of learn your worth and learn that all these bad all these bad voices that you're hearing in your head are just that, and they're not the truth, they're not your truth, and your, your worth is much more than maybe you realize.
that's a really great point because when you are in that kind of pain, that's a very, very low vibration. It's about as low as you can get,
Oh,
really.
for sure.
And when you're at that low, a point that is that low of a vibration, what you're really doing is you're living in a place that goes completely against who you are. And the only way you can really do that is if you don't feel good about yourself.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's a key point. It's a person who is dealing with this stuff has a very low sense of self-esteem, self-love, self-confidence, and so on. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's sometimes astounding to look back at how low my vibe was just a few years ago, but it also
Mm.
kind of appreciate the times, both the times that I was in that and also just the growth since then.
That's a pretty cool statement you just made there. You learn to appreciate those times.
Mhm. Absolutely. Because I think in a way like that we call it contrast a lot, like they kind of inspire growth and new creation in a way.
I think it's true. And I've actually had a number of guests here on the program who report that they were suicidal at one point, including our own Daniel Mangena. Daniel,
Oh,
when he was in his early 20s, he was suicidal. And look what happened to him in his life. I mean, he turned it
I know. It's
so
like picture
completely around. He's a multimillionaire. He's so successful.
right.
Blah 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 blah. I mean, like huge, huge shift. Which just goes to show you, it can become a springboard if you turn it into one. But
Yeah.
appreciation is a big part of that, isn't it? You have to have the
Abs-
appreciation. You have to learn the appreciation, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. It doesn't come overnight, but it's definitely a very powerful tool.
So, as you look back at your path over the last few years, how did you end up in your mind? How did you end up building your own self-esteem, discovering your own self-love, and so forth?
I'm not exactly sure. It's come in waves and little bits and pieces over the
Mm,
years. And
yeah.
some of those like lower vibrational habits and thought patterns don't just go away overnight. So I sometimes like have those, they sometimes creep up here and there, but then I just kind of like, at this point, I think not judging yourself and not being hard on yourself and like treating oneself as if you are like your best friend, your most beloved person is kind of key. Because I remember just one day early on into this like kind of upward journey, having this moment of clarity that I love myself, and then I'd struggle with that for a little bit, like forget and such, but then I caught myself kind of talking badly to myself, and I'm like, hey, wait a minute, no, don't talk to me like that. Or I was like, wait, like I reframed it as if I were talking that way to like my mom or my brother or somebody I really love, and I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, I wouldn't do that to them, so why would I do it to myself?
Right, yeah, I get that. Shelly just asked a question. Are we doing readings? No, Shelly, we're playing a little Q&A, which we sometimes like to
Oh yeah.
do here on the show. Basically, I just grabbed a post that somebody posted today on Facebook, and we're using it as an as if kind of a conversation. So, what would we say as if we were talking to this person directly? And this
Ah
particular
yes.
person was feeling suicidal, so we're talking about experiences with dealing with suicidal thoughts. Which I've never actually had suicidal thoughts. I've been extremely depressed. I have been there, and I was there for quite some time. But for some reason, I never moved over to the suicidal range. Probably because I'm married to a woman who knows psychology and knew how to
Oh yeah.
snap you out of things. So
That would help.
it helps a lot, no doubt about that. But even before I met her, I remember times where I would get very, very depressed, and I never really went there like other people have, so I'm not quite sure what the difference is there, but whatever.
That's interesting. Not a bad thing though.
No, it's not a bad thing. It's just different experiences. We all have different experiences in life.
Oh yeah,
Now,
for
n-
sure.
now there's a theme that has this theme very well. This is a theme that has come up a lot here on the show, particularly with all the guests that we've had over the years,
Oh
where
yeah.
the guest comes on, they tell us about this really terrible dark night of the soul they had, or there was horrible trauma when they were growing up, or they had some horrible event happen in their early young adult years, or something like that. And then it
For
becomes a springboard, and all of a sudden things get better after that because they do the important work on themselves, and then they look back on it and they say, "Wow, it was the best thing that ever happened." Now, this may be a
absolutely.
little bit early for you, but do you feel like that was the best thing that ever happened?
In a way, yes, actually, because I feel like I'm still like I'm still a work in progress. One could
Yeah.
certainly say, but I feel like I'm definitely in a pretty good place right now, and I feel like things will continue to get better and better as I continue to find more appreciation for what is and everything.
Exactly, because it's always a work in progress for all of us, no matter where we are, right? No
Part of
matter
being
what.
human.
That's it. We're human beings, and
Exactly.
having a human experience, and it's very often these kinds of things take time. I mean, my last big depression range was just before I started doing the podcast, so 10 years,
Right.
you
It was
know.
kind
And it's taken 10 years to get to the point where I am right now, and every minute of it was worth it.
of
It's all
absolutely.
the good, yeah. But 10 years is a long time. That's a big chunk out of life, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. That's interesting. Now I'm thinking, well, that kind of led me to think, wonder where I'll be in 10 years. But it'll be great, whatever it is.
I think it will be. That's always a fun question to ask ourselves too.
Right.
And there are two ways you can play this game, actually. You can ask yourself, if you were to meet your future self, what would you want your future self to say to you? And you could
Ooh,
also go back to your past self, and what would you want to say to your past self, or what would your past self would have wanted to hear from you? Have you ever played
that's
that game?
a little bit, but not fully. That would be an interesting one. I
Let's
may,
try it. Let's try it.
yeah,
Like right. You just expressed interest, wondering what you would be like in, say 10 years from now, right?
right, right.
So if you had all of a sudden you had the opportunity to meet your 10 years older self, what would you want your 10 years older self to say to you?
I would like to think it would say something along the lines of, "You are on the right track. Keep doing what you're doing. The clarity you're seeking is going to come, and you'll figure out more, and it definitely does get better, and just keep trusting, keep believing, keep being good to yourself, and never rush anything. Listen to your source connection whenever you're in doubt. You don't have to act or say or do or say anything without, like, take all the time you need in any interaction or situation, but just keep trusting, and definitely gets better." And I get a very like I just imagine this person being very like successful and comfortable and happy with who they are, where they are, and doing exactly what I would be wanting to be doing.
That's
So
a good
there's that.
answer. I like
Yeah.
that. That's a really good answer. I was asking myself, how would I answer that question?
Oh yeah.
You know what I think I'd like to hear? I think I'd like to hear my 10 years older self say to me, "Oh wow, I wish I could relive the period you're going into right now.
Oh, I like
You're
that.
going into like this an amazing period, and you have no idea what's coming, but man, this is good stuff."
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a really good thing. Now let's reverse it. Let's go back in the past, like going back 10 years ago. If you had the chance to talk to your 10 years younger self, what would you say to yourself?
Trying to think. Okay, 10 years ago. Oh yes. I know where you are in life right now isn't where you're wanting to be. Don't judge yourself for where you are. There's value in what you're experiencing right now. Try to find appreciation for where you are. It's not as hard as you may think it is. And a lot of the things that are worrying you or bugging you aren't so aren't as big as you're making them. So just release that and know that you are worthy and love yourself because you are worth that and more. So just be good to yourself and trust things are working out. Something like that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I asked myself the same question before I even could come up with an answer. I got a song that came to my head, a very old Beatles
Ooh.
tune,
Oh.
and it came to my head because I remember it going through my head 10 years ago. It would go through my head periodically, and I'd say to myself when I'd hear it, "Yeah, right. Really? Maybe?" Like playing a little table tennis, like, "Yes, I kinda buy into it. No, I don't buy into it," back and
Oh
forth,
yeah.
back and forth. But the lyrics of the song is, "I have to admit it's getting better, a little better all the time. It can't get no
Oh,
worse." And I kept thinking that over and over again.
I
And,
like
well, sure enough, it did get better over time.
there you go.
And I was at a point where it really couldn't get much worse. I mean, if it had gotten any worse, basically, it would have been homeless. That would have been the worst, It was yeah,
Right.
so the lyric actually played out true.
That's wonderful.
So maybe that's what I would tell my past self. That lyric you keep hearing, it's true.
Right, right. Pay attention. Maybe it's there for a reason.
Yeah, it's real.
Oh, I love
Yeah,
that. That's
because
really good.
that's a way to kind of encourage that younger self to do the kind of connecting you were talking about, connect to that inner self, right? Listen to
Absolutely,
that inner connection, pay attention to the messages.
for sure.
There's an interesting question for me too, because at that time, I didn't have any clear idea that I had an internal connection. I'd
Oh, me
heard
neither.
about it. Okay, so you were in the same space, right? And I don't know about you, but for me, I didn't really have a belief that there was an internal connection. I had heard about it for years. People had been telling me for years, but anytime I tried to go inside, I got nothing. Well, I actually didn't get nothing, but I didn't realize what I was getting. I didn't recognize the messages that were coming through. There were messages. I just didn't think they were messages.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, I can relate to that. I didn't know much of anything of that, nor did I try. But looking back, I've had moments where I've looked back at things in my past. I can't think of an example right now where I was like, okay, yeah, that definitely manifested because of this or whatever.
That took me a while to learn that one and accept that one. The idea,
Right.
I think that was actually one of the reasons I started the podcast. Now that I think about it, because I had seen the Secret came out in
Oh,
2006, and
okay.
and I saw the movie for the first time in 2008, that same year as
Oh,
the financial crisis.
oh my goodness.
And from the moment that I saw the movie, that was one of the questions that kept going through my mind. Just what you said. How could that be? Is that possible? Does that really happen?
Right.
And I
Oh,
and I didn't know the answer, and I didn't know how to make it happen. I didn't know how to do that dive inside. I didn't know how to make that connection.
right.
And so I was like, is it true? Is it not true? Do I believe it? Do I not believe it? How do I resolve this? And I didn't know. So it was actually one of the reasons I started the podcast.
I love that.
Because I was in a place where I didn't know the answers. I couldn't afford to buy anything. I was so poor at that
Right.
point. I couldn't afford anything. So I figured, well, if I start a podcast, maybe I can get some experts to come explain things to me that I can't afford to pay them for the coaching.
Absolutely. I think
You
that's
know?
genius, actually, and it's worked out. It's probably even better than expected.
Well, I guess given how it worked out, it is genius. At the time, I'm not sure I would have called it genius. I think I would have called it desperation, but hey, whichever.
Tomato, tomato. I don't
Yeah, a little bit
know.
of both. Yeah.
Oh,
But yeah, it's fun to kind of look back. And actually, we're going to be doing more of that because I'm coming up on the 10th anniversary in September. Yeah.
that's right. I knew it was coming. I wasn't
Yeah, it's
remembering.
coming soon. September
Yeah, it's almost
26th.
August. So, woo.
Yeah, getting really close. And it kind of makes me think about, it's been quite a journey so far, and wondering what the next 10 years are going to be like, because I don't foresee myself wanting to stop doing the podcast. I'm enjoying it so much.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But man, a lot of growth in that time. A lot of growth. I think it's helpful to have a lot of years like that to
Mhm.
be working on yeah, it's slow when you're going through it, but when you
Sure.
look back over it, it feels like a full journey. You know what I mean?
That absolutely. Yeah, because it takes time to just kind of find your footing and everything, and then there's shifts and ebbs and flows and
Yep.
everything.
And all those little tiny steps of progress and, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, all that kind of stuff, because that's what you go through. It's actually what creates more texture to the whole 10-year experience.
Absolutely. It's all part of the journey, as we
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Whereas if it happens quickly, I'm not sure you appreciate that much.
That is
I
true.
wanted to. I mean, at back 10 years ago, I wanted it to happen fast. I was done with
Oh
that
yeah,
point,
that is fair. That's fair.
right? You know, but I'm not so sure that it would have made as much of an impact as having taken as long as it did.
Absolutely. No, I think the journey. I'm finding. I'm finding a lot of the time I look back at things, it's like, no, this was perfect in its way, not imperfect, but perfect.
Mhm. Well, you also said something else earlier, which I loved. You talked about, I don't remember how you said it exactly, but the gist of it was being a lot kinder to yourself.
Oh yeah,
That's really, really big.
that was huge for me because I maybe as a defense mechanism, or maybe like I'll talk down about myself before anybody else can talk down about me because I was, I guess,
Oh,
expecting
wow.
that or something like that. And it was I don't know what started it, but it became a thing for me for sure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. How did you reverse that?
honestly, it was going pretty strong until maybe, yeah, like somewhere along my spiritual journey. But really Taya is what kind of really helped me get past that, because it's all judgment. And when I
Mm.
realized like how judgment lowers your vibration, and especially judgment of oneself, I think that I whenever anytime since I've caught that, it's like, okay, well, let's not judge myself for that, because that's not going to do any good. And that's helped. I'm doing it a heck of a lot less than I used to.
Which is great. I love that. That's very
Definitely
important.
grateful for that.
When you let's talk about the Thai experience because we've both been through the boot
Oh
camp,
yeah.
right? Now one of the things that you hear about pretty quickly once you enter boot camp is you're going to have a crash and burn at some point. That's not necessarily the way they say it, but that's what it amounts to, right?
Right.
And I'm wondering how quickly did yours happen? Mine happened with module one, but I'm wondering how fast yours happened.
I think it did in a way. I don't know if instantaneous is the right word, but yeah, kind of yeah, module one
So it's pretty
probably.
quick, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they don't really hold anything back. You dive right in. It's not
Oh,
like
for sure.
it's 3 modules of setup. It's no, you go after it right now. But
For sure.
yeah, I was a little shocked at how quickly it hit and how hard it hit.
Oh,
I
for
was
sure.
I
Yeah.
was I was
Sure.
surprised.
It was interesting. Yeah, it was tough for me to think of my parents as transgressors because I do love them a lot. And
Yeah, sure.
generally speaking, if we were to label parents as good or bad, I would say that they were generally good parents, but that doesn't mean they were perfect, and they were just doing best with what they had,
Yeah,
the knowledge they had available to them at the time.
right, exactly. And that's one of the things that you learn in boot camp. You learn to see that, to gain that
Yeah,
perspective.
exactly.
Now, do you remember from boot camp where you first started to really get the new perspective you were developing?
That's a very good question. It hasn't been that long since I did boot camp, but it's been long enough that I don't remember the specifics of the timeline. I think it was a gradual process, but I know by the end of my boot camp experience, I, at the very least, had enough of a handle on the four pillars of
Hmm.
Taya, or the tools that David would graduate me. But then, as sorry, I might be taking, or what's the word, digressing a little bit, but
No, no, it's fine.
I feel like David sometimes refers to like being out in the wilderness, and there was a little bit that going out, but I feel like I've experienced a lot more growth after I graduated, even than from start to finish in the boot camp experience.
Yeah, a lot of people report that.
And I guess that makes sense, because for at least for me, it was like what 3 months versus I graduated in like April of last year, so that's 15 months since then or something
Right.
like that. So
Yeah.
that's a lot more time to grow.
So that makes sense,
Oh,
especially if you're using the tools like you're supposed to afterwards. So yeah, totally makes sense. I
for
know for
sure.
me, the answer to the question of, when did I start getting the new perspective? It happened with, they give you the meditations, right? They give you two different meditations.
Is the seeing through the eyes of source one?
Right. Yes.
Okay, yeah,
The
actually,
the
yeah,
first
that
one.
that one definitely did a lot for like breaking open my perspective.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I love it's a very simple, meditation for those who haven't been through the boot camp. The basic idea of the meditation is that you start here on Earth, and then you imagine yourself kind of floating up into outer space until you get further and further away from the Earth to the point where it's this little tiny pinprick. And then you realize how small the problems are that you're experiencing on that planet way over there. And
Exactly.
yeah.
I,
There's
I love that meditation. I feel like it came up in another one of your episodes, not one that I was, but somebody else or somewhere I heard that specific meditation mentioned kind of recently, and I did it again, and it's definitely beneficial to
it
do that
is.
in such a way.
I mean, all of the Taya experience, I believe, is designed, among other things, to take the sting out of old stuff that just kept playing as tapes in our heads, to the point where
Absolutely.
we can let go of it and let get all the feeling out about it, so it's no longer haunting us. And for me, just that experience of meditating on moving further and further away, physically away from the planet, even though I really wasn't, but I mean, in my mind, I
Right.
was. That alone just it took a lot of the heat out of the stuff that I've been dealing with.
Absolutely. Yeah, same here, and definitely appreciate that. It's a valuable tool for sure.
I mean, they call it seeing through the eyes of source for a reason
Oh
because
yeah.
that's what it's like, right?
Right. Gotta love that.
Now, I can't honestly say that I it, when I was first doing that meditation that I was truly seeing myself through the eyes of source, because what we're told, and I now believe, that source loves everything, every choice that we're making. And I can't honestly say I was in that space yet.
Oh yeah.
But it doesn't matter because what was happening, I was changing perspective. I was in the midst of making the change. So it wasn't
There you
about
go.
did I get it all right? It was I making progress?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Something I just remembered here listening to Abraham Hicks, like, I don't know how long ago, but just something that they said that really stuck with me is that source is beaming for us. And I've,
Ooh,
and
I like that.
me too. I had it written down on a post-it for a while, and I still, it's internalized at this point. But when I think of that, just that little sentence right there kind of does something for me. It kind of helps me come into my source connection and just know that wherever we are, whatever we're doing, feeling, or experiencing, source still just loves us unquestionably.
Mm. It's quite a concept. I remember what my reaction was the first time I heard it. My reaction was, "Oh yeah, okay, right."
Not the easiest thing to wrap one's head around for most
Not initially.
people.
It takes some time to get used to that one. Once you get used to it, then it starts to really make sense, right? But
Oh, for sure.
yeah, but at first, no, not so much.
Right. What you talking about?
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, well, there's some cool stuff. We've both been through the Thai experience. You made the reference earlier to how you've learned so much more since then. Is it
Mhm.
because of just the time, or is it because you used the tools during that time, or what do you think has made the difference?
I think there's both the time and the tools come into play because for me time because sometimes it takes sometimes for some time for things to sink in for me, and so
Mm.
that's part of it, and just kind of allowing that to flow. And also just the Taya community is great because you can have these like-minded people and to bounce ideas off of and compare
Yeah.
experience and everything. Um, and of course, I have a good friend who lives in the same city as me, who is actually the individual who told me about the Stream of David and Taya, and who I spend a lot of time with, Luke Hurtaza. And so
Yeah.
so that friendship specifically has helped a lot as well.
That's very cool. I mean, not too many people who went through Taya can say that they did it through a friend that they knew physically in the place where they live. That's really
Right.
cool. Yeah. And
Yeah,
for have Luke
different.
to bring you in like that is really that's quite remarkable to have that experience that way.
Oh yeah.
It I mean, were you
Absolutely.
guys really close before he told you about that, or did you just kinda meet, or how?
We met once about a decade prior to when, because yeah, about it was like 2011. We met once and we kept in touch for a little bit, but then sort of lost touch. And then in September of 2020, I want to say. I found him happenstantially on social media, and I was like, wait, I
Oh,
think this is that. And then we connected, and I kind of somehow caught wind of the fact that he was into, like, I don't know if it was Abraham Hicks specifically, but I was listening to a lot of Abraham at that point, and I
mm.
mentioned Abraham, and then he's like, "Oh, if you like Abraham, you might like this." And he gave me a link to one of the, I think it was one of the shows where Debbie's talking to the stream and such.
Oh,
I'm like,
okay.
great, and then kind of just went on from there.
Just went from there. He's saying hello again from the live stream.
Luke, hi.
And he says, yes, it was Abraham Hicks. So definitely a shared memory that you can both say, yes, that's exactly the way it happened.
Indubitably. Yeah,
That's
much, much,
great, though.
much,
I
much.
love that. Yeah,
Oh,
I
for
love that a
sure.
lot. Since you left boot camp, and Luke, this is actually a question for you too, because you've been in boot camp. So if you want to type a question or type an answer in, by all means, we'll read it on the program here. But Sam, since you've been through boot camp, what would you say is the biggest form of growth that you've experienced? Because you said you've grown a lot, but if
Uh,
you had like pin yourself down on, well, this is where I've grown the most. Where is that thing at?
I think simply my vibration. I'm a lot more joyful and I think I am. I think maybe even everybody, as I could be as bold to say, is, but I feel like I am inherently a joyful person. My mom was very bright, joyful person, and so I think that in a way helped, when she passed almost a year ago, kind of inspiring me to be more like, hello, right there, your mother is like a perfect example of like love and light and kindness and
Mm,
joy. So that had a lot to do with it, but I think that's my main takeaway. But also because my mother passed about 4 months or so after I graduated, Taya. She was in her whole journey at the point I was in the boot camp, but I believe I would have had a much harder time with that had I not experienced Taya. So I'm very
mm.
grateful for the timing of that, as well.
Yeah, because that's rough to lose a parent relatively young like that. That's really
For
tough.
sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
My wife went
But,
through that. I didn't go through that. My parents both died, as having lived a full life, so I didn't experience it
oh,
that way.
yeah.
But, yeah. And Luke says his biggest growth was knowing his self-worth,
Oh, for sure.
right?
For sure.
I think that's one of those things that is ongoing. I think we keep developing. Once we become aware that it's important to do, we kind of it's like we start paying attention to it. Like, how am I feeling about myself? We ask that kind of a
Uh,
question periodically, and the more that we ask it, the more we end up doing more and attracting more to help build ourselves up over time.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The worth thing is, for whatever reason, the worth component of it is something that's taken a little longer to, like, I know it, but it's taken longer to kind of sink in because I think I've had a past of not knowing my worth, and sometimes so that's harder to undo perhaps, but it's, yeah, still
If
there for sure.
are you able to kind of pin yourself down on, this is a certain way that I really appreciate myself that I didn't appreciate myself before?
Uh, yes, I can't think of words to verbalize specifically, but I know the answer is yes, because I can think of thinking that about myself on several
Mm.
occasions.
'Cause I mean, I can point to something specifically just doing the podcast.
Oh yeah.
I was never really afraid of having conversations with anybody, but, we're on, like, episode 1765 or something like that.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure what the exact number is, but there's a lot of them is my point, and
Right.
you do enough of them like that. I've gotten to the point now where not just doing a conversation, but doing a conversation that can be watched and listened to by others
True.
is second nature now. It's easy. And
Absolutely. That's a good point. I wouldn't have thought myself able to do
yeah,
that retire for sure.
right. And when I first started, I've told this story before. When I first started, my wife did the first episode with me, and I was glad we didn't have any listeners because that way I was able to take the pressure off.
Oh yeah. That
Now
would
it's
do
like
it.
it's exciting to have listeners now, but back then
Oh,
it
for
was like
sure.
terrifying.
Yeah, that's not a bad way. You start out, you can almost like you're practicing, and then by the time you
Mm,
get a listener base, you have the audience, you're ready for them.
exactly. Yeah, it's a combined growth process, the growth of the audience and the growth of the host at the same time. Yeah,
Oh, for sure.
yeah. It
Uh,
shows how synchronistic all this stuff is. Literally
right,
synchronistic.
right. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, very good. Well, we've been covering quite a bit here. So let's see, where else can we go? Oh, let's do another question. Let me see if I can find another.
Oh yeah, I think we've only done one so far.
We only done one so far. It took
We
42
got a
minutes,
lot out of that one
right?
question.
Well, I won't read this whole one because this is about 8 paragraphs long.
Oh my goodness.
Let me see if I can just get the gist of it is. He's hurting or she's hurting. I'm not sure if it's a he or she. Hurting because uh wondering if he or she should end things with the partner.
Mm,
And
that's
then there's
always.
on and on all the stuff that's going on with the partner. And then toward the end, I just don't feel loved. I don't feel appreciated. And I feel like it's always me making the effort.
Mm,
He said he's going to try harder, but so far there's been nothing.
mm. My just hearing that, the first thing I can think of is, do you feel love and appreciation or whatever it was they said for yourself? Because
Mm,
if you don't, then I feel like what you're going to manifest is that, or what you have manifested is that.
mm.
But yeah, if you don't feel loved and appreciated, then I I would, my gut feeling there is that this relationship is not serving you. Um, of course, you have to. There's probably a lot more to that, and like what is their history? What have they gone through? What is it that caused them to get together in the first place? But ultimately, if you're not feeling loved and appreciated by your partner, then definitely give that some serious consideration.
Yeah, how are you feeling about yourself? And I've confirmed it is a woman, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Because at one point she describes herself as a plus size girl. So clearly she has
Uh,
some body image issues going on. And
that's
body
that's tough. I feel like anybody of any shape can be beautiful, but like I'll use the term the stream uses, the matrix kind of says you have to be a certain shape to be happy,
Mhm.
successful, and I don't think that's the case.
No, I don't think so either. And in fact, if you want to get to a different shape, you have to change that thought process or you won't get there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So it becomes
Like,
essential.
so
But you're right. And there are a lot of people who have gone through that and who go through it
oh,
now. A lot of people are still going through it.
for
And
sure.
it's a very tough place to be in. So I think you're probably right. The fact that she's feeling so unloved has a lot to do with how she feels about herself,
Right, right.
which
So
ties
that would,
back to what we were talking about before.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and you see a lot of posts like this if you look for them on
Right.
Facebook.
Oh yeah,
There's a bunch of
I can
them.
imagine. That's yeah. It's the human experience. It's not easy, but I guess it's not meant to be.
Yeah, as I'm reading this more carefully, she's writing all about body image.
Oh, bless.
That's really what's going on here. She has a very poor sense of her own body image.
Mm. I,
Well,
I I I just get the sense that this person's more beautiful than she realizes that she is. Is
yes, yes. Well, I think
or,
it's pretty clear because, like you said, she's got anytime that you have body image issues, you have self love issues going on.
for
So
sure.
if she has self love issues going on, then she doesn't know how beautiful she is. She doesn't
Yeah.
realize it. Yeah, because beauty is way beyond looks,
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And
way beyond looks.
I've gotten to a point now where if I think somebody's beautiful, it's the whole deal, the whole person, the inside and the inner and the outer, not just the outer.
I have a niece who is a plus size woman, and I have to give her a lot of credit
Oh yeah.
because she has turned it into a virtue.
I love that. Good for
She has become a plus size model.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, and she's done actual shows, actual fashion shows.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good
Talk
for her.
about taking what some people to consider to be a liability and turning it into an asset.
I think that's good, and I think that's important also because she's setting an example for other plus size women who maybe don't have that love for themselves or that confidence. It's like, look, here's an example. You can be bigger and beautiful or confident and sexy and all that.
And she is. She's a beautiful woman. She really is. I
That's
mean,
awesome.
in every she is kind, she's thoughtful. She's a public school teacher. She
Oh, nice.
teaches history or social sciences, something like that. I can't remember exactly what she
Okay.
teaches.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
and yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that her students love her. Doesn't
Oh,
surprise me one bit.
yeah.
And
Oh,
and
that's
she's basically allowed herself to just be the lovely person that she is, regardless of what her body type is.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we can't all be born into these like Barbie or Ken's shaped bodies. That's just not. If everybody looked like that, then
Well, it's not actually, in many cases, it's not even healthy. I mean,
yeah,
could
yeah, definitely.
very often that ideal of that I can't remember which guest it was, but a guest in the last couple of days referred to the stick figure woman.
Oh
That's
yeah.
an anorexic,
Ooh, yeah. And
and
that's not,
ex and
not an,
it's a dangerous, dangerous thing.
definitely.
I mean, I've known people who are anorexic. My wife actually went through anorexia before I met her.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
she's been down that path, and yeah, it's a really, really rough place to be. Talk about lack of self-worth.
Oh, for
Huge
sure.
lack of self-worth.
And there's like so much fear of judgment, I would think, that goes
Yeah,
into. Oh.
there is. There's a ton of it. And so, yeah, the ideal isn't all that ideal, I guess is what my point is.
Right, right. I do feel like nowadays we are seeing more moving away from it ever so slowly but surely, like seeing more examples of what they might call body positivity and just different body
Mm,
diversity and such.
I agree. Yeah, I think and it's healthy. It's
And
nice to see, right? It's really it's refreshing anytime, and you see it a lot more. You of course, now that we're all much more connected than we were, 30 years ago, it's
true,
easier to
true.
to find instances of stuff, but nevertheless, you see a lot of it.
And yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad for that. I think it's good. The world needs to see more of everything.
Which leads to what I think is a great topic to kind of wrap up the conversation today. We haven't
Sounds
actually addressed this topic in a long time here on the show. We've made reference to it occasionally over the last few months, but never really dived into it. We dove into it a lot during the pandemic. I think it's probably why we kind of
oh.
left it behind. But it's the topic of all of the craziness going on, the polarity, the huge amount of polarity that has been going on in the world for the last few years in particular.
Ooh,
And there's a lot of people who think that polarity, all that high contrast, the divisiveness and so forth is a really terrible thing, and we got to do something to change it and all that kind of stuff. We would talk a lot here during the pandemic about how the polarity is actually perfectly okay. There's nothing really wrong with it, and in fact, there's a lot of good to be learned from it, and there's a lot of good things that are going on. My perspective, and I'm going to be curious to know what your perspective on this is. My perspective is that during the time that the pandemic was going, particularly, um, very few people were seeing change. I was seeing a lot of change going on. I was seeing a lot
mm,
of progress and so forth. But I think very few people were seeing that, probably because they were just feeling so down from being in lockdown. But my impression is, and I want to know, this is where I want to know what your take is on this. My impression is, since the whole thing has started to open up again, societies have started to open up. Most societies are now pretty much open now. You can pretty much do your normal life with some minor modifications, but pretty much your
right.
normal life again. I think more people are beginning to sense that this terrible contrast thing that they've been so worried about for so long isn't that big of a deal. I think they're beginning to kind of find their way. They may not see themselves as being on a spiritual journey, but I just get the feeling more and more people are finding themselves on a journey of some kind. And I'm curious to know, are you seeing the same kind of thing?
I am actually, yeah, for sure. 'Cause I remember having conversations like even last year when we were kind of mid-pandemic with some friends who weren't necessarily of the spiritual sort, but we're seeing like noticing that a lot of people were starting to experienced some change, and in many cases for the better, just because I think the pandemic, like, sorry, I have a lot of thoughts here, so let me get
Mhm.
trying to gather them. Like, a lot, and everything, not just the pandemic, but everything happening, like with the racial
Mhm.
injustice and everything, just like kind of opening our eyes to how things are. Maybe we didn't realize because we were so busy with pre-pandemic life and with
Mhm.
things down. It kind of opened our eyes and kind of allowed us to reframe our perspectives in a lot of ways, or it's an opportunity for self-actualization, I think, for a lot of people, having all that time to themselves.
Well,
Kind of.
that word perspective, I think that's it. I think that's exactly why we're both seeing the change happening, because
uh,
people, whether they wanted to or not, found themselves with different perspectives,
for sure.
very different from what they were used to. It was almost forced down their throats in a sense, but they found themselves just having to see life differently because life was all of a sudden different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can, that's one of the main things that I was, or one of the main things that allowed me to find appreciation for the pandemic, because it kind of gave us this space to allow us to reflect and kind of, eventually reframe our perspective and everything.
Mariah in the live stream is asking, may I get a reading, please? We have a lot of people who think we're doing readings today, but we're not actually doing readings,
If I
Mariah.
could, I would love to, but yeah.
Because neither one of us feel like our psychic abilities have developed to the point where we can confidently tap into where another person is at. But what I would invite you to do, Mariah, instead of looking for a reading from us, have you practiced trying to read yourself?
Mm.
Have you practiced going within to see what your own messages are? That I have been practicing that now for the last 10 years. I haven't made tons of progress, but I've made some. And I can tell you that's probably one of the best things that I've done during that 10-year period. And I've done a lot of cool things during that time. But just trying to go within and see what can I get from source myself is probably the best thing that I've done. Because first of all, it's a way of building your own self connection. And Mariah says, "No, I don't think I have the gift." I didn't either, Mariah. In fact, I still don't think I have the gift, not entirely. But I've been told by enough people that we all do that I start to believe it. And I think the gift really is all about just trying to make the connection anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't really, uh, my my first thought when you said that's like, yeah, I can't beat that. Just tapping into your own source connection.
Yeah.
Everybody has it. It's a matter of kind of finding it, and it's doable for
I mean, some
anybody.
people, for some people, it's very, very easy. They're the ones we call the psychics, the mediums, all that kind of
Oh
thing.
yeah.
Because it's just they've just been able to acquire it very, very simply. But we all have the same connection, right? And she's saying, well, she's acknowledging here. She says, I do try to talk to my mom, but there's nothing there. Well, don't be discouraged by that. I had years and years of getting nothing, not just talking to my mom, talking to anybody, just like, hello, anybody in there? Is there anybody listening? And I was
Right,
in
right.
silence for the longest time. It took a lot of conversations with people here on the show for me to start to notice that I actually was getting messages. I just didn't realize I was getting messages. And they're still few and far between. I still don't have a high degree of consistency with them. But the best way I've learned to describe it and understand it is the connection is a continuous connection.
Mhm.
So imagine like you always had a light on. You're wherever you are, there's always this light on, and it never turns off. What happens over time, particularly in the human life, is if it's always there, we kind of discount it. And I think that's what happened with me. I
Yeah.
knew there was this space. I can't really describe it any other way. There was this space that was always there, and I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't understand what it was. I didn't know what to do with it. But I've come to realize that's my source connection.
That makes a lot of sense to me, actually.
You have pretty much the same kind of experience, sort of.
Yeah, I'm in the midst of that myself.
Yeah.
Right? Like sometimes I'll hear voices in my head, not exactly sure if it's source or just my own head and such. But I think I'm in the process of kind of getting out of my own way.
And even though I still haven't gotten to the point now where I can get regular communication through that source connection, just the awareness of it, just saying, okay, that must be it. That must be that source connection everybody talks about because it's always been there. I just didn't really realize it was there because it never turns off. It's always the same thing. There's no contrast, right? It's always the same thing.
Lord.
and and so over time, I've had to come to realize that what it was. But just that alone, just recognizing it, has helped me in many ways. And
Absolutely.
now I get now I'm recognizing I'm getting messages. They don't happen all the time. They don't come necessarily as words. They don't necessarily come as pictures. They don't necessarily come in any particular way. But if I keep my eyes open, so to speak, if I keep my attention open, if I keep attentive, being attentive, I start to notice that things come my way, ideas, thoughts, comments from people, experiences, a whole range of things. And I'm starting to see the pattern to them. The pattern is showing up as this is part of a source message. That's a source message. That's part of a message over there. So I think they're right. I think we all do have the ability. Just some of us have a lot more practicing to do. Kind of like, when you're a pianist, right? You have to
Yep.
practice.
Absolutely. It's very
Yeah.
like that.
I mean, how were you when you first started playing? Were you a prodigy?
No, no.
No, I
It
wasn't either.
started very simple, very simple.
One note at a time, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Very few of us are Wolfgang Mozart. Most of us have to, pick it out and do it one little tiny piece at a time. But with practice, you can become a pianist like Sam. I mean, you're a
Woo!
fabulous pianist, right?
Oh, thank you.
So it's my point is it's a learned skill. We can learn
Yep.
to make that connection. Even if we don't have it yet, we can still make it. And we can learn from it. We can get stuff that's kind of unexpected from it. And I'm convinced, I mean, we talked about, 10 years ago, 10 years forward. I think 10 years from now, I'm going to realize that I have a whole much better connection than I have right now. But just because I
Oh
keep
yeah.
working on it. I keep practicing it.
Definitely. Same here, because it is just, yeah, something that keeps getting more connected as you work at it.
It does. Yeah.
You will.
Well, this has been fun.
It has been. Yeah, this worked out nice
Yeah.
today.
It's kind of disappointing we didn't have our guest, but this gave us a chance to try out your microphone, get a sense that it really works. It works. Hooray. This is good.
Rocks. That's always. I like it. I like it. No, I'm just pleased with how it worked out.
I think it worked great. So thank you very much, Sam. Thank you, people
Thank you.
participating in the live stream. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.